Live from London, this is Global Business.
Hello, welcome to the programme. I'm Jamie Owen.
And I'm Robin Dwyer. Our top stories. Eurozone inflation jumps for the third straight month, dampening hopes of a jumbo rate cut.
Our other headlines: the future is now. NVIDIA unveils its next generation of gaming chips and humanoid robots.
Search and rescue operations are underway in freezing conditions. 126 people are killed in a powerful earthquake in China's Xizang Autonomous Region.
And 5 people have died and thousands are without power as a fierce winter storm hits much of the United States. Inflation in the Eurozone has jumped for the third straight month, dampening hopes of a big rate cut by the European Central Bank later in January. Eurozone inflation rose to 2.4% in December. That's slightly higher than the previous month. The ECB's target is 2%. Core inflation, which excludes things like volatile changes in prices for food and energy, remains steady at 2.7%. Adding to the pressures on inflation, unemployment remains at record lows across the Eurozone. The jobless rate stood at 6.3% in November, unchanged for a fourth straight month, and lower than the same period in 2023. Well, let's talk now to our correspondent, Will Denslow, who's watching events for us in Brussels. Will, what will this mean for rate cuts or no rate cuts?
Well, analysts are really rather buoyant still. They do expect the ECB, the European Central Bank, to crack on with their plans of cutting interest rates in late January. At least that's how the markets are pricing things in, and do still very much expect the ECB to cut rates at least 4 times next year. However, the big caveat is that Christine Lagarde, the head of the ECB, has consistently maintained that any decisions taken by the ECB will be data dependent. Now, if we look a little bit deeper into the numbers for inflation across the Eurozone for December, well, as you mentioned, 2.4% is an annualised rate. That was in line with analysts' expectations, but it's a 0.2% increase compared to what we saw in November, and it's the third straight month we've seen an increase in core inflation. Back in September, it was down at 1.7%. The reasons for that, well, looking at December, we've seen energy prices tick up, an annualised rate of 0.1%. That's compared to minus 2% back in November. The services sector, well, that remains incredibly sticky still for inflation. That's up at 4% compared to the 3.9% we saw in November. And across the Eurozone, it's certainly not a same story. It does vary quite radically. Here in Belgium, core inflation up at 4.4%, Croatia 4.5%. If we look at countries such as Ireland, that's down at 1%. So quite a lot of difference across the Eurozone. And, however, despite that, the ECB has consistently maintained they expected inflation to tick up during the latter parts of 2024. They still, last we heard from the ECB, expect inflation to be around 2.1% in 2025. They expect it to tick down below their target rate of 2% in 2026.
Will, that's the broad landscape. Can we just drill down into one country for a moment and perhaps look at Germany revising its inflation rate to 2.8%. What's the story behind that?
Absolutely. In Germany, absolutely crucial considering the fact it is the Eurozone and the EU's largest economy. You're absolutely right. It was revised up to 2.8%. That's compared to the analysts' expectations of 2.6%. So that certainly will be an area of concern. Significant as well, considering that Germany is expected to hold federal elections next month. So this will be the last time we'll get inflation readings, consumer price readings, before Germans go to the polls in late February. And there's also the concern, of course, that Germany's economic growth remains incredibly anemic. Some analysts expect it to be down around 0.1% for 2024. So that is a huge area of concern, not just for Germany, but for the EU in total, considering the fact that many expecting Eurozone GDP growth for 2024 to be just up at 0.4%. And while Christine Lagarde, the ECB chief, does expect economic growth to pick up in the future, she says that significant headwinds do persist, namely, of course, the threat of a potential trade wars with the United States when Donald Trump takes office. Of course, that remains a huge unknown, but she has essentially said in recent months that tariffs don't benefit anyone.
Will, thanks for that. Our correspondent Will Denslow in Brussels.
Indonesia has formally joined the BRICS group of emerging economies, which also includes China, Russia and India. Jakarta's bid got the green light in 2023, but it waited until a new government took office before officially becoming a member. Indonesia says it wants to play a more active role in global issues and increase cooperation with other countries.
China and the United States have agreed to manage their differences during the transition as Donald Trump prepares to take office in the White House. A virtual meeting has taken place between China's Vice Premier, He Feng, and United States Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. Vice Premier He also expressed concern over the recent U.S. trade investigation into China.
China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has held talks with his counterpart in the Republic of Congo. Both countries are looking to deepen cooperation, as our correspondent Chris Okamringa reports from Brazzaville.
Well, Mr. Wang Yi has just concluded a meeting with his Congolese counterpart, Jean-Claude Gakoso, and they discussed the strengthening of the cooperation, the partnership between the two countries. The Republic of Congo and China have had a long history of trade relations that dates back to the 1960s, and they are very determined to deepen that relation in a number of other areas. For many years now, the Republic of Congo has been exporting crude oil, wood, zinc and refined copper to China. And China, on the other hand, has been exporting electronic gadgets, ceramic tiles, clothing and footwear in very large quantities to the Republic of Congo. So they want to increase this trade between the two countries in other areas like agriculture, healthcare and military and the security sector. China is supposed to give military assistance to the Republic of Congo so that they can develop a stronger army to defend its country from any external aggression. So that is what has just happened, and he's going to have another meeting with the President of the Republic of Congo, Denis Sassou Nguesso, where they will hold a press conference and issue a communique about what they are going to do. What we have heard is that this is a follow-up meeting on the implementation of issues that were agreed upon by African leaders and President Xi Jinping at last year's Forum on China-Africa Cooperation in Beijing. And so they are going to ensure that they implement a number of issues, trade relations, to increase business for both countries and for the mutual benefit of their people.
Isabel Hilton is the founder of China Dialogue.
We're reminded every year at the beginning of the year of the value that China places on the Africa relationship, because this is now a 35-year tradition that the first trip the foreign minister makes is to Africa. And you know, these, of course, symbolism is important in diplomacy, but this is a mark of respect. It's a mark of commitment, of long-term commitment, and it stands for, if you like, all the investment and trade relationships that China has with Africa, which come under regular review, regular discussion, and China is always seeking to develop them.
Many countries have deep footsteps in Africa. Is China's approach to Africa different from that of the United States, the EU and other Western countries?
Well, I think historically, obviously, it's different. I mean, the distinction that China would make is that historically it wasn't a colonial power in Africa. Today, I'm not sure there's such a big distinction, although there clearly is a big difference in scale. The EU has its own Global Gateway program, which is a development program for Africa, much smaller than China's investment. And of course, the nature of China's investment continues to evolve. We're not seeing quite as many big infrastructure projects as we did at the beginning of the Belt and Road Initiative, but we're seeing an increased importance, for example, on Africa as a supply chain, a strategic supply chain partner in terms of minerals, particularly strategic minerals, and particularly those which are involved in the low carbon transition. So I think that if you look at the scale of China's operations in Africa, that's the key difference between the US and indeed the European Union.
Namibia, Congo, Chad, Nigeria. What are the reasons for selecting these particular countries, and what might those countries expect to gain from China?
Well, they all have, their particular relationships. Nigeria is a very important influence in West Africa and an important influence within the African Union. So enhanced cooperation with Nigeria would be good for promoting China's interests across the continent. There's a big energy relationship with Nigeria and indeed with Chad, important bilateral trade relationships. So, these countries, the visit traditionally picks different countries every year. Congo is also, I believe, chairing FOCAC this year, and this is an anniversary year for FOCAC, the Forum for China-Africa Cooperation, which is a big and important part of this relationship. And I think that we would perhaps expect some advance on the proposal that Xi Jinping made at the last FOCAC summit last year, that the relationships with African countries be upgraded to strategic relationships. So I think we'd probably see some progress on that.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, the next chapter of AI. NVIDIA's boss announces the company's new generation video game chip.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with Global Business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
For China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us. And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
You might think you are better informed in an information age. The fact is, people are more often misled by misinformation. You might think every voice is heard in a digital world. The fact is, many nations and peoples are still underrepresented. And data poverty shuts out many. We at CGTN are committed to transcending the information gap and the digital divide. CGTN, bridging nations and civilizations. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. Developments in artificial intelligence are taking centre stage at the world's largest consumer electronics show in Las Vegas. Our correspondent Mark New reports from CES.
At CES Unveiled, entrepreneurs show their products to a worldwide audience, many for the very first time. And for some products themselves, like the companion robot Maroka, it's an opportunity for one of its first international interviews.
What can you use your arms for?
I can use my arms to grasp handles, carry items up to 3 kilograms, wave hello, and even perform tasks like thumbs up or down.
Can you move around and spin around and dance?
we can create something really useful, but also bring magic, bring storytelling, bring smile everywhere. So we want to show that a robot can be something that are more just than a machine.
New innovations come in all different shapes and sizes and sounds. Singer Susie Cruz isn't proficient with a guitar, but has quickly managed to pick up playing the first ever stringless smart guitar called Liberalize.
It's really so that you can back yourself up vocally and have that sound of the guitar without having to learn guitar.
Hong Kong entrepreneurs designed the instrument, which uses sampling and frequency simulation tech with the goal of making playing a guitar effortless.
So basically, when you're listening to the guitar sounds here, it's very similar and close to the original sound of the guitar. So everyone can enjoy music at the ease with just playing with one finger or two fingers.
A number of other Chinese startups are also making the preview show their U.S. debut. The Shenzhen company Lingyao is introducing the Hydron 1, which can wash a car with just 2 liters of water and recover the wastewater.
We have the algorithm to all the wash the cars. We can calculate that.
While Lin is excited to be at the show, she's the only one from her 9-person company that managed to secure a visa to get here. In fact, the high number of visa rejections for Chinese companies was acknowledged by the organizers of CES, who in December sent us a statement saying they encourage the U.S. government to expedite and approve visas for individuals who are traveling to the U.S. for legitimate business reasons. CES show director John Kelly said he isn't sure of how this year's Chinese presence will compare to years past, but still hopes the show can serve as a bridge.
We want the U.S. and China to find common ground, our governments to find common ground, wherever that may be. You know, the success of this industry, it's not one country that's going to lead this industry. Look around CES. It's every country has a role in this industry, and it's important for every country to be reflected here at CES.
Mark New, CGTN, Las Vegas.
Well, NVIDIA's CEO, Jason Huang, has made some big announcements at this conference. The US chip giant unveiled its new AI models to train robots and self-driving cars, as well as its next generation of gaming chips.
Here it is, our brand new GeForce RTX 50 series Blackwell architecture. The GPU is just a beast. 92 billion transistors, 4,000 TOPS, 4 petaflops of AI, 3 times higher than the last generation Ada. And we need all of it to generate those pixels that I showed you.
Well, let's talk now to Angelo Zeno, who's Senior Vice President and Technology Equity Analyst at the research company CFRA. Good to see you, Angelo. Welcome to the programme. A couple of really big announcements made there by Jensen Huang. Let's talk about this one that could perhaps transform robotics. What does that mean for us?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think when you kind of think about Jensen and kind of what he talked about specifically and really the opportunities he touted last night, it was in really 3 areas, right? It's agentic AI, self-driving cars, and robotics humanoids. And he announced a number of kind of software upgrades and capabilities, you know, for, particularly the Cosmos platform out there that really is going to kind of pave the way towards kind of this, towards making robotics a reality here over the next couple of years. We're thinking kind of more 2 to 3 years away. But, you know, he's definitely planting the seeds right now with kind of the chip architecture as well as the software capabilities. And our view is it's going to completely kind of redesign the supply chain out there at some point in time. Autonomous cars, he highlighted as kind of this the first multi-trillion-dollar opportunity within kind of the robotics ecosystem out there. We're a believer in that as well. So it's going to completely transform many industries out there, specifically and maybe foremost the car industry.
So that in itself huge, but there was more, wasn't there? Including a next generation of gaming chips with AI capability, and that could really be transformative for gaming.
Yeah, so as far as kind of what they announced on the hardware side of things, it really kind of was on the gaming side, and they kind of announced their kind of next gen RTX chips out there, and this was actually somewhat delayed, to be honest with you. Their cadence has historically been every 2 years or so. The expectation was this was going to kind of come out ahead of the holiday selling season. The fact of the matter is Blackwell was kind of delayed. Priority right now is Blackwell kind of on the data center server side of things. They had to get that right. So we're finally seeing these chips here. They're going to ramp, in a cadence where kind of the highest performing chips will kind of roll out first and kind of go mainstream over the next couple of months. But when we kind of saw some of the details and some of the capabilities, and it is going to be somewhat AI, there are a lot of AI features kind of connected to it, but specifically when you kind of look at the movie-like type capabilities that these graphics chips are going to provide out there, we think it's absolutely phenomenal. But that said, gaming is now less than 10% of sales for NVIDIA, so it's not going to have kind of a massive. It's not going to be a massive needle driver out there for NVIDIA itself. It's going to be a bigger kind of driver for the broader gaming industry.
And we've already seen, haven't we, enormous developments in this area, something that's already developing fast. Do you think these innovations will see things speed up even more, bring perhaps what we've thought of as being science fiction to science reality?
So, we do think 2025 will kind of be the first year where AI really kind of goes into implementation, right? So we've kind of seen this evolution of AI over the last couple of years where we're kind of now in this kind of Gen AI phase, which kind of began to ramp in 2023. As we kind of go into 2025, we think 25 will be the year of agentic AI, these AI agents out there across the enterprise space. Specifically in areas like call centers and what have you. So, as we kind of, flow through that in 25 and 26, I think as you get to 2027 and the latter half of this decade, that's really where you're going to see more of those futuristic opportunities out there as far as robotics, greater autonomous capabilities in the car is concerned. But yeah, I mean, we think it is absolutely kind of on the table right now, and that kind of shift towards artificial general intelligence that kind of all these mega cap companies have talked about, I think you're going to see here, sooner than later.
So when we talk about NVIDIA in particular, this is a company that's really led the way in AI chip making. Are there any other competitors, any other companies that can come close to what it's doing?
Probably not on the chip side of things, if that's kind of, the conversation that we're having. When you kind of think about, other players kind of in kind of the compute side of things that can kind of help pave the way towards kind of greater compute abilities, and then kind of drive greater software innovation? The answer to that is yes. I mean, you've got companies out there like an A&D, which also kind of gave their keynote speech yesterday. Also companies on the custom silicon side of things, which we're very bullish on, a name like Broadcom and Marvell on that side of things, especially as we move towards more on-device capabilities, and you start thinking about robotics or autonomous cars. You look at what Elon Musk has done on Tesla's side of things, where they have that kind of custom silicon chip driving their cars out there. We think custom silicon is going to be a huge opportunity out there. So there are going to be other players that are going to kind of push the limitations out there as far as kind of progressing towards kind of this next evolution of AI. It's not going to be just NVIDIA, but NVIDIA will clearly lead the way here, and we think they've got the best pipeline of the bunch.
So NVIDIA really till now has sort of been dominant, hasn't it? Perhaps too dominant, though, because that does bring risks, doesn't it, in forms of regulation and competition?
It does bring risk out there, and listen, I mean, this is a company that maybe does have some monopolistic capability, themes on their side of things. But when all said and done out there, this is a company where we think they're going to continue to be a market share leader. They're not going to own the full pie out there, and a big reason for that is when you start thinking about a lot of the hyperscalers out there and other providers out there. No company wants to kind of be completely tied to one supplier out there or reliant on kind of, an NVIDIA exclusively. So it's going to broaden out here over the next couple of years, and there are going to kind of be regulatory concerns that probably pop up for NVIDIA just because of their size out there. But that said, it's not going to take away, we think, from the potential of this company and the opportunities, at least for them to continue to grow their revenue from these levels.
Angelo, great to talk to you today. Thank you so much for being on the programme. That's Angelo Zeno, Senior Vice President and Technology Equity Analyst at CFRA.
Well, the anticipation and then the announcement of those new products from NVIDIA means the chipmaker has once again made its mark on the markets. Let's talk to our correspondent John Terrett at the New York Stock Exchange. John, what's NVIDIA stock doing now?
Well, I tell you, Jensen Huang is the Elvis Presley of AI. That's how you should think about him. He did a rock show in Vegas yesterday, which I'll tell you about in just a second. And because of that rock show, the NVIDIA share price rocketed up the pop charts and was at a closing record on Monday of $153.06, lifting the Nasdaq by 1.2%. You've got to remember that NVIDIA, who we had all barely heard of 2 years ago, is up 127% in the last year and is flirting with $3.5 trillion in market capitalization. I say all of this because now it's down. Okay, this is always the way on this program, isn't it? We build this up, we build it up, we build it up, and then the share price has slumped. And it has slumped in the last couple of hours. It's down about 5% now, $142.64, a decline of about $6. But you've got to remember, it's up 127% for the year, so we're doing okay. And Jensen Huang really did put on a show in Vegas yesterday. It was more of a rock show, honestly, than it was a tech explanation from a tech boss. It is, he said, now the fourth industrial revolution that we are living through. The first one, of course, was steam and print. Then we had all the technology that we've all grown up with. Then 20 or 30 years ago, we had the digital revolution, and now we have the AI revolution. And he is really flexing his muscles. That's what he's doing. He is literally one of the most powerful and richest men in the world. He's right up there with Elon Musk, except he doesn't really get involved in politics in the way that Musk does. So there he is flexing his muscles and his company's muscles by introducing new partnerships. There was one with Uber yesterday. Uber shares are up 0.5% now. That new suite of chips, all of which means nothing to me, the RTX 5090, I don't know what in heaven's name that is, but I just know it's very expensive and very, very fast. Also, he announced that Micron, which is based in Boise in Idaho, in the northwest of the country, is going to be the lead supplier of these new, what they call GPUs, graphic production units, which NVIDIA is designing and talking about, and Micron will make them. And just now, let's steal from CNBC, shall we? Why not? There's no point in being the exchange if you can't steal from your colleagues. On their screen, Trump is now speaking in Mar-a-Lago, and on their screen, it's said by sources that he's going to announce $20 billion worth.
John, I'm going to interrupt you because we are going to cross over to Donald Trump, which is dreadfully rude to interrupt you in full flow. But let's see if we can hear Donald Trump now speaking live. It's an honor to have such a great
investor.
He's in Florida, in Palm Beach,
country.
and let's listen.
The investment will support massive new data centers across the Midwest, the Sunbelt area, and also to keep America on the cutting edge of technology and artificial intelligence. He's very big into the data centers, and that's going to be a very hot item in the coming years, as you know, with AI. In particular, the first phase of the project will be in Texas, Arizona, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Ohio, Illinois, Michigan, and Indiana, those places. And Hussein, I'd love you to come up and say a few words. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, well, what we missed just at the start of that was President-elect Donald Trump speaking in Florida at a press conference that I guess we're going to get used to over the coming days in the lead-up to inauguration as he enters the White House. But specifically what he was talking about there was a $20 billion data center investment across the United States, and that investment being made by a UAE group. So a $20 billion investment in data centers across the United States, and the people behind it, a big UAE group. Let's return to John Terrett and hope that he's still talking to us. Are we going back to him? He is still. We're going to go back to John. John, dreadfully sorry to interrupt you. There's only one person on this program who is more important than you.
Don't do it again.
It is, of course, Donald Trump. Let me ask you, in the 10 seconds we've got left, about Facebook, because big change is going on there. What's the story?
I can't do this in 10 seconds. This is the big lead story here. So I know Don is producing today. Have the defibrillator standing by, please. This is really the big story. I'll try and simplify it for you. Basically, what's happened is that Facebook, under Mark Zuckerberg, is basically changing the way that they fact-check. Okay, they're changing it into a community. It's going to be a community of people who are going to fact check in future. Have you ever posted anything on Facebook and then seen somebody come up and block you because they don't like the way you wrote it or what you said? And you go, ah! Well, apparently all of that is now changing in favor of a community of people who are going to get together and make sure that you are treated more sympathetically. Basically, Zuckerberg says this is a response to the election. We're going back to our roots. We're doing away with mistakes. We made too many mistakes. So we're talking about things like political content, immigration, and gender issues. Now, Meta has before and is today accusing the Biden administration of pressuring it to censor its content on Facebook. So that apparently is going to end. The question is, would this have happened at all if Kamala Harris had won the election? Nobody knows. You must make up your own mind. Meta platform shares down 2%.
John perfectly
don't interrupt me
explained
again, by the way, Jamie. I'm very upset.
A genius at work. John Terrett at the New York Stock Exchange.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead. Rescue operation underway. Powerful earthquake hits China's Xizang autonomous region, killing at least 126 people.
Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you. All around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
What do we mean when we talk about the difference? The difference is in the detail, the background,
defense ministers from
the wider angle and perspective of every story, wherever the story may be. CGTN. See the difference.
We are all connected. Across borders, across continents, connected by ideas, a shared humanity. Stay connected.
Hello, welcome back to Global Business Europe with Jamie Owen and Robin Dwyer. Our top stories: Eurozone inflation jumps for the third straight month, dampening hopes of a jumbo rate cut.
And Nvidia unveils its next generation of gaming chips and humanoid robots.
At least 126 people have been killed and dozens more injured after a magnitude 6.8 earthquake hit China's Xizang autonomous region. The quake struck a remote area known in the West as Tibet. President Xi Jinping has ordered all-out rescue efforts to try to minimize the casualties.
The epicenter was around 80 kilometers north of the world's highest mountain, Mount Chomolungma, also known as Everest. Dozens of aftershocks were felt, including in neighboring Nepal.
Yes, so I've been to Dingzhi County a couple of times, and I'd have to say that most of the affected areas are actually in rural parts of the plateau. So these are isolated villages. They're far apart from one another. They're far apart from the county seat, far apart from any major city, with very limited roads connecting them. And now many of these roads may have been damaged or completely destroyed. Communication lines may have been cut off. So one of the major challenges is to actually to get to these places. Another thing is distributing supplies. Just distributing relief goods to these isolated villages is especially challenging, especially given the rugged terrain and the high altitude winter conditions. Now, cold is another concern because, like we said, this is a high altitude region. Average elevation in the affected areas is more than 4,300 meters above sea level. And with winter underway, temperatures at night may drop to well below minus 15 degrees Celsius. So keeping these people warm and ensuring that they have access to enough food and enough water and shelter and other essential supplies is extremely critical. Chinese President Xi Jinping has ordered an all-out effort to reduce casualties and to ensure the safety of those who survive. Now, West China Hospital, which is located here in Chengdu City, is one of the biggest hospitals in all of Western China. They mobilized a team of medical experts consisting of experts in neurosurgery, chest surgery, trauma, emergency care, and the latest information that I got from members of the medical team is that they arrived in Lhasa about 3 hours ago, and now they're on their way to Shikaze region to provide much needed medical assistance. Now, on a slightly more hopeful note is that many of the housing structures in the affected areas are actually 1 to 2 story buildings, so they might not be that kind of high-rise apartments that we typically see in big cities. So this means that it might be easier for rescue workers to be able to move faster to locate survivors, and they're indeed racing against the clock. And I do want to bring in Dr. Wang Tun, who's with the Institute of Care Alive here in Chengdu City, because the earthquake this morning has actually successfully triggered your alert system. So tell us more about that.
Okay, this earthquake has triggered the earthquake alert early warning system, and millions of people received the alert through television, cell phone, and for many schools, loudspeakers. So they have seconds to tens of seconds of time for evacuation.
Right. So I think most of us right now are quite worried about aftershocks in the region. What's your expertise on that? How likely are aftershocks to be able to cause more damages?
Okay, up to now, the earthquake is a main shock aftershock type earthquake, which means after the main shock of magnitude 6.8 earthquake, there are more than 40 aftershocks with the maximum aftershock magnitude 4.3 or so. So we expect that there are many more aftershocks afterwards, which is very similar to the case of 2015 Nepal earthquake, which is very nearby to today's earthquake. So for that earthquake of magnitude 8.1, the aftershock takes more than 1 month.
Right. And what about other secondary disasters? You also talked about landslides being able to cause more.
Yes, because these are the high mountain areas, so the landslide would be a lot for triggered by the earthquake or the aftershocks.
Okay, and what's your advice, just very quickly, one sentence to the local community?
Okay, to keep warm and to keep away from the landslides and so on.
Right. So thank you so much, Dr. Wang, for joining our show. And that's all from us. Back to you in the studio.
Tao Yuan reporting. Hostage coordinators have flown to Israel as part of a renewed push to reach a ceasefire in Gaza. They're scheduled to meet President Isaac Herzog and families of Israeli hostages. Israel says it's committed to seeing its captives return home, while Hamas says it needs a week of calm in Gaza to locate everyone.
Russia says it's repelled Ukrainian counterattacks. It claims to have shot down 6 United States-supplied missiles and 50 Ukrainian drones. This comes as Moscow continues to fend off the Ukrainian offensive in Russia's Kursk region. President Volodymyr Zelensky claims nearly 15,000 Russian troops have been killed there in the last 5 months.
South Korean court has reissued a warrant to arrest impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol after the previous one expired. He's wanted for questioning on alleged abuse of power and insurrection over his decision to declare martial law last month. He remains at home after failed attempts to arrest him last week, but investigators say they're determined to bring him in.
Ceremonies have been held in Paris to commemorate the victims of the Charlie Hebdo attack 10 years ago. 12 people were killed when two Al-Qaeda-linked gunmen opened fire at the office of the satirical magazine known for publishing caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad. The attackers were shot dead by the police. The magazine has published a special edition to mark this anniversary featuring a front-page cartoon captioned "Indestructible."
Now it's one of Africa's driest countries. Botswana is experimenting with drought-resistant plants, which are proving to be a lifeline for farmers. Chinese experts are bringing new varieties of rice to try and improve food security. Our correspondent Wilkista Nyabwa reports.
In a rice field in Botswana's capital, Gaborone, blades of green wave in the wind. This test field is part of an effort to improve food security in the country. Since 2020, Chinese experts have partnered with their counterparts in Botswana to introduce drought-resistant rice varieties in the country. African Agriculture, a Chinese company that seeks to empower Botswana's farming community, has been part of the push. In Botswana, rice is a staple alongside maize and sorghum.
Botswana country, most of food is import. Actually 70%, more than 70%, it's import.
The COVID-19 pandemic disrupted rice imports, prompting the push for local production.
It's many countries, because they are protect themselves for the food security. They are refused to export to us. We are thinking, I think this is the chance to promote our people to plant rice or any other crops by ourselves.
Stakeholders reached out to Chinese experts, including the Shanghai Agrobiological Gene Center. This led to a collaboration with Botswana's University of Agriculture and Natural Resources. Together, scientists identified 3 rice varieties best suited for Botswana's dry climate. In their test farms, they found that this drought-resistant rice needed less water and fewer chemicals, benefiting farmers with organic practices.
You can grow it in the field where you are growing maize. Actually, if the amount of water that is needed for maize can also satisfy the rice to grow sufficiently.
Especially for rice, as long as the farmer can irrigate, the pest infestation and the disease outbreaks that we have seen in our research shows that we don't use a lot of chemicals for it. We just use organic. It grows very well, so the farmers will benefit. Inorganic fertilizers are becoming very expensive.
Initial trials show yields of between 5 to 8 tons per hectare, boosting harvests. Plans are underway to eventually distribute seeds across the country. Stakeholders have also begun to assemble farm machinery and avail their spare parts.
The expectation is that if we have our own resources, genetic resources of rice, we have machinery to grow rice, to plant, to harvest and to process, we become food secure in that way.
Each move is a nod to the impact of the information exchange between China and Botswana's agricultural experts. Their collaboration marks a step towards reducing food imports in Botswana, building agricultural resilience, and supporting Botswana's path to self-sufficiency. Wilkista Nyabwa, CGTN.
You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, who will take over from Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau? The runners and the riders to lead the Liberal Party.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
Unprecedented scenes that we saw.
The clean-up operation is now well and truly underway.
Parts of southern Europe remain in a state of emergency.
Context gives meaning. People make history.
Far more than 1,000 people have come here today.
But authorities are still on high alert.
So now we've actually become the border on this road.
A complex world demands a comprehensive view.
But with the cleanup efforts more or less under control,
The economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
There's plastic pollution everywhere.
Because the world today matters for your world tomorrow.
This is the living area of the crew.
The focus is firmly on future technologies.
Well, this is something completely different.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Welcome back to Global Business Europe. Canada is set to get a new Prime Minister after Justin Trudeau resigned amid political turmoil. He's been in office for 9 years, but came under pressure from his own party to step down.
Trudeau has suspended Parliament until March and said he'll stay on until a new Liberal Party leader is chosen. His successor is expected to face an election by October. Our correspondent Evangelo Sipsas is in Toronto.
He has been one of the longest serving prime ministers in Canada, the 7th actually longest prime minister in Canada. He took office in November of 2015 and he resigned in January 2025, some just over 9 years. Some of his achievements or some of his legacy was social policies, climate action, trade negotiations with people around the world, but also how he focused a lot on the indigenous community. That's some of the achievements, but all those also have been faced with criticism by the Canadian public. Now, what the next day might look like and who's going to be the leader, there are 4 names right now that are topping the charge list, so say. One is Anita Anand, who is currently the Transport Minister of Canada and also served as a Defense Minister here in Canada. Dominic LeBlanc, who is the Finance Minister currently in Canada. Mark Carney, who is the ex-governor of Canada and ex-governor of the Bank of England as well. And also a surprising name, which is Chrystia Freeland, the ex-finance minister of Justin Trudeau, who resigned last December. And she is the one who's leading in the polls of more popular to lead the Liberal Party. So that's pretty much what the next day might look like in the Liberal Party and who will lead the country in these upcoming elections. And I have to say that whoever is going to lead the Liberal Party and is going to run in these federal elections is not going to be an easy task, as the opposition right now is almost 20 points difference with Trudeau's party.
Evangelo, the other great challenge, of course, for whoever wins, Donald Trump taking office very, very soon. Rather tricky, I imagine, for Canadian-US relations.
Very, very tricky relations. It's always been a rock-solid relationship between Canada and the United States. The biggest partner between Canada is the United States. But we've seen now that the past year, Trudeau's relations with Donald Trump and the U.S. government is not as easy. The waters there are pretty wavy. There's rocky. One thing is, of course, these tariffs that Donald Trump has said is going to slap on Canadian products, 25%. That could possibly see the country here in Canada an increase in inflation over 7% by mid-year, but also an increase of unemployment by the end of the year of 8%, which translates to 150,000 layoffs. And then this comment about Canada becoming the 51st state. We all thought in the beginning it was a joke. We thought it was just a conversation between Donald Trump and Justin Trudeau as they're having dinner. But after Justin Trudeau resigned, then we saw that Donald Trump posted that on social media again. So there has been a lot of concerns here in Canada of whether that's real or not. But there have been prominent business people who kind of hug that idea of Canada becoming the 51st state. And that's because Donald Trump said that he would like, if it becomes a 51st state, then there will be no tariff. So it doesn't matter if it's true or not. The next day here in Canada is quite difficult when it comes to the relationship with the United States. One is dealing with Donald Trump sitting on the table, balancing diplomatic relations. On the other is actually bringing back economic sovereignty to Canada.
At least 5 people have been killed in a winter storm that's hit much of the United States.
The extreme weather has caused school closures, widespread travel disruption and power cuts. Our correspondent Owen Fairclough reports.
Winter's first big bite of 2025. Almost the entire eastern two-thirds of the country buried by a blizzard that brought record snowfall to some regions. Despite repeated warnings to stay off the roads, drivers were trapped in places like Kansas City, Missouri, where freezing temperatures were forecast to drop as low as 7 degrees Celsius or 12 degrees Fahrenheit below normal. In Virginia, emergency services responded to some 200 vehicle crashes.
And Washington, D.C. has almost pretty much ground to a halt. Behind me is Kansas Avenue, one of the main commuting thoroughfares to the downtown. And as you can see, apart from emergency workers clearing snow, there is very little traffic in this area, making it into the downtown or indeed out of the city. And behind me here, Washington Latin School. Now, at this time of day, the field there would be teeming with kids at recess. But not today. Every school in the District of Columbia, as well as in neighbouring Maryland and Virginia, has been closed due to this snow blizzard. And the federal government, the US federal government, is also pretty much at a standstill this Monday. Workers being told to telework. Apart from emergency workers, they're expected to try and brave the conditions to keep the city functioning.
As well as lawmakers certifying Donald Trump as the next president, while outgoing President Joe Biden was able to jet to New Orleans to join a service for those killed in the terror attack. Meteorologists say melting Arctic ice caps driven by climate change are to blame for driving a polar vortex south, with the storm forecast to extend into Tuesday for many areas. And the blizzard isn't isolated to the US. Southern Ireland, Northern England and Germany also suffering similar impacts on travel a day before the US. Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
High-profile resignations in corporate America and worldwide are nothing new. But as more young people enter the workforce, employers will have to prepare themselves for a new way of quitting. And it's often done with an online audience of millions watching. Our correspondent Isabella Diaz reports.
The rise of TikTok has launched a wave of workplace trends. First, there was quiet quitting. Then there was rage applying, where young employees vent their frustrations. Not to mention bare minimum Mondays, where employees do as little work as possible. Each hashtag collecting millions of views on social media. But over the past year, one trend has become louder than the others. And it has many Gen Z workers very publicly quitting their jobs and letting their fellow employees, bosses, and online followers know exactly why. It's called loud quitting, and it's dramatic, calling out bosses and what some consider toxic workplace cultures. And it's often all out in the open for everyone on the internet to see.
So you were not quiet quitting then?
No, I was not.
Opposite.
I was very loud quitting. When I found out I was underpaid, I told them, like, this is exactly how much money I need to make to be fairly compensated. I showed them the jobs that were hiring for that. And then I also brought to the table, this is the impact I've had on the contract.
According to a 2023 Gallup Global Workplace Report, 1 in 5 workers across the globe are actively disengaged or loud quitting. And it's Gen Z, people born between 1997 and 2012, who are leading the online trend. Not just recounting their resignations, but often showing the very moment it happens.
This is me about to quit my corporate job. So I just wanted to call you and let you know that I've made the decision that it's time for me to move on. This is me 15 minutes after quitting my corporate job.
Part of the reason may be the way Gen Z views corporate culture. According to a Credit Karma survey, 60% of Gen Z adults in the U.S. consider the typical 9-to-5 job a grind. And it doesn't end there. In fact, that same survey found that 1 in 4 so-called Zoomers were actually motivated to quit their own corporate jobs when they saw videos of people doing the exact same thing. And while loud quitting may not be new, this workplace trend could matter more than ever in 2024 when it comes to Gen Z hires. According to career website Glassdoor, full-time Zoomers are set to outnumber baby boomers born between 1946 and 1964 in the workplace for the first time this year. And some analysts say employers will have to change their workplace perks and priorities to make the job worth their while. For Gen Z, that often means job flexibility, more in-person interactions and feedback, and a good work-life balance. If not, employers could see some very public and loud resignations. Isabella Diaz for CGTN in Washington, D.C.
Final preparations are taking place ahead of next month's Asian Winter Games. China's ice city of Harbin will host the event. Our correspondent Joe Joshin reports.
China's hotspot for ice and snow sports is ready to host the upcoming Asian Games. Officials on Tuesday announced the lineup of the main creative team for the opening and closing ceremonies of the event at the start of a month countdown to the Winter Games. The opening ceremony is scheduled for February 7th and the closing ceremony for February 14th, centering around the official slogan of the Games, Dream of Winter, Love Among Asia. More than 1,200 athletes from 34 Asian countries and regions are expected to compete in China next month.
The 9th Asian Winter Games will see the highest participation in the event's history, which fully demonstrates the enthusiasm of Asian countries and regions for ice and snow sports and the great attachment to the Games.
7 of the 14 planned test events for the Games have been completed according to international standards, covering sports such as speed skating, figure skating, ice hockey, as organizers continue to run security checks, emergency drills, and staff training programs at all competition and non-competition venues. The first gold medal will be awarded on the morning of February 8th. The Chinese team will make its debut in the mixed doubles curling round robin on February 4th. Harbin has seen an increase by 20% year-on-year in the number of visitors since its Ice Snow World opened 2 weeks ago. On Sunday, China's first international level ice and snow-themed festival also kicked off to warm up the Asian Winter Games.
In China, there will be about 520 million trips in the ice and snow leisure sectors during this winter season, with the tourism revenue anticipated to surpass $85 million. In Harbin, where the cold weather has already met the hot economy, the festival and the Winter Games are expected to have the snowball effect on the economy. Joe Joshin, CGTN, Beijing.
The headlines again. Eurozone inflation jumps for the third straight month, dampening hopes of a jumbo rate cut.
For other headlines, while we've been on air, Donald Trump announces a $20 billion foreign investment to build data centers across the United States.
NVIDIA unveils its next generation of gaming chips and humanoid robots.
And search and rescue operations underway in freezing conditions. 126 people are killed in a powerful earthquake in China's Xizang autonomous region.
That's it for Global Business Europe. Thanks for watching.
Coming up next on CGTN, it's Africa Live. We'll see you again tomorrow, same time, same place. From all of the team in London, it's goodbye.
Goodbye.